Hello, Lakers Nation. Welcome in. Trevor Lane here for LakersNation.com, your home for everything Lakers. Welcome into As the World Turns, a.k.a. the Russell Westbrook saga in Los Angeles. Now we've got to report that a divorce seems likely between the two sides. We're going to break down some possibilities there and what this might mean, including discussing whether or not bringing Russ into training camp. Actually something the Lakers can afford to do. Joining me is Sean Davis from LakersNation.com. Sean, Russell Westbrook, still a Laker for the moment. How are you doing? And let's get into what this split might look like.
I'm doing all right. You know, it's never fun when the parents, start colliding and, there's a divorce. There's always the kids that unfortunately get brought into that somehow. I don't know what I was trying to do there. That was a very poor attempt at a relationship analogy. But yeah, this is getting crazy. And now there's just a whole bunch of smoke going out there. So let's dive into it.
Matt the Optimist Peralta is disappointed with that analogy, Sean. But Jovan started this article off for The Athletic. Just slap you in the face with this one. The dynamic between the Lakers and Russell Westbrook is becoming more untenable with each passing week as the two sides seemingly head for an inevitable divorce. And he's not wrong. Like, as much as the Lakers have publicly said all the right things, right? Rob Pelinka, we're going to welcome him back with open arms. Darvin Ham talking about how excited he is to have Russell Westbrook on his team. Russ showing up for Darvin Ham's presser. All it takes is one Russ and LeBron ignoring each other at Summer League to throw all of that out the window. And now here we are. And Jovan saying, look, this is getting worse each week because Russ understands the Lakers are trying to trade him. And based on what just happened last Friday with his agent, with Thad Fouché, putting out there that Russ doesn't want to come back. Russ doesn't want to be a Laker next season. It seems like we're getting closer to the point where it's just not a possibility to keep Russell Westbrook, despite all the stuff the Lakers are saying. Am I wrong in my read of that?
No, not at all. And actually, our initial reaction was, and what I said was, if you're a Laker fan that wants to see Russell Westbrook gone, you should be somewhat happy because now this brings up a sense of urgency for the first time the Lakers never really had in moving Russell Westbrook. Even though they were shopping him around, they weren't going to do it for the right deal unless it was for the right deal. But now there's a sense of urgency because the Lakers, I think, properly understand we cannot let this drag in a training camp. Dragging this to August 4th is already one problem you don't want to run into, but dragging this into training camp is a whole nother set of issues as well, because then you have media day and stuff like that you have to deal with. And if Russ is on the team become media day, all the dirty laundry is going to be thrown out on that one. So, yeah, I think that's a proper read there, Trevor.
So here's the thing. Russell Westbrook, a lot of this hinges on, will he do the things Darvin Ham is asking him to do? And the stuff that Darvin Ham is asking him to do in terms of be a defense-first player, spend your energy there, be willing to play off-ball, be a cutter, be a screener, all this kind of stuff. That's not new. That's not, Darvin Ham came in and nobody else has ever asked him to do this before. Wow, it's a whole new world out there. No, this is stuff. Frank Vogel was saying the same stuff. This is stuff that's been talked about for years with Russell Westbrook. He's just never done it, either because he can't or because he's not willing to. Maybe both. So we're at a situation now where Jovan brought up the possibility that the Lakers might just tell him to stay home, that the Lakers might tell Russ, don't even report, stay home. And here's what he added in. The subtext to Fouché's language was that Westbrook doesn't want to adhere to new head coach Darvin Ham's vision for him. Westbrook becoming a defensive first point guard who plays more off the ball than he did last season or any season of his career. Then Jovan says that's not surprising because the Lakers used a similar framing for Westbrook's projected role last season, and it never came to fruition. Westbrook has no interest in role player tasks. Darvin Ham has said the opposite. Darvin Ham has said in all of his interviews that Russell Westbrook, they've had a bunch of good talks. They went out to dinner. They did all of these things. They've been texting, and Russ is on board. And he's excited and all of this positive stuff. And here's Jovan saying, don't buy it. It's not happening. If Russell Westbrook, if that's the case, if what Jovan is saying is correct in his piece for The Athletic, and Russ is still and maybe this makes sense because he's always been this way, is still of the mindset that I'm not doing that stuff. I'm Russell Westbrook. Give me the ball, get out of the way, set the lineup around me. If that is still his mindset, is the proper course of action for the Lakers to tell him to stay home?
If there's no other reasonable options on the table, like Kyrie or some other potential destinations, then yeah, I think you should just tell Russ to stay home. Because, again, you can't let it drag into training camp. But if it does drag into training camp, if Russ is really not committed, then what is the point of having him on the roster? There's no point, because all he's going to do, if he's not committed to what the coach wants, then there's no point. Just send him home, wish him farewell, whatever. Tell him to see the door on his way out. But if he's not willing to commit to what Darvin Ham wants him to do, which is what's best for the team's success, then send him home. Unless Kyrie's on the...
I like that phrasing, Sean. I like that. So, wish him well, but tell him don't let the door hit him on the way out.
Don't let the door hit him on the way out. But unless Kyrie's available, unless Charlotte somehow says, hey, we'll do that deal again, Indiana, Utah, maybe. Unless I'm not trading him to New York. I'm not doing the Julius Randle trade. I'd rather just send him home. So unless one of those trades I just mentioned are on the table, just thanks, Russ. Sort of, maybe not really, but thanks for whatever you provided last season. The door is right there. I hope you sit. We'll pay your money for this year. Bye. And then go trade for shooting, whether it's THT and none, whatever. But if Russ isn't willing to buy in, you're wasting a LeBron year if you just keep him.
Here's the thing. And I think you're right. I think you're right if that's the point you get to. If Russ just outwardly says, Darvin Ham says, Russ, we need you focused defensively. We need you being a role player on this end of the floor, all that kind of stuff. And Russ just says, nope, not doing it. Stay home. Stay home. That's it. Stay home. If the Lakers can't trade him, stay home. The Lakers are better without him being on the floor if that's his mindset. However, I'll say this. If Russ is on board, if Jovan's not correct here, if what Darvin Ham says is correct, and Russ is saying, I will do those things. Now, we can be skeptical that he can or ultimately will do those things. But if Russ is saying, I will do those things, then you absolutely bring him to camp. Because otherwise, you are making it a certainty that you're paying $47 million to a guy to not play basketball. You're paying more money than anyone on the team to not play basketball. And because of that, if Russ was a minimum contract, okay, maybe we're talking differently here. But because of how much money is involved here, in my mind, I believe you have to try it. Even if you're skeptical that it will work, you have to give Darvin Ham that opportunity. It's only if Russ is outwardly saying, I'm not doing it, that you tell him
sounds like right now. Yeah. So again, like you said, if Russ is saying that report by Jovan is absolute crap, that's not true, I'm going to be blocked in and bought into what Coach Ham wants to do, then no, agree. Yes, you see it out, right? Because then a whole bunch of other problems start to come your way. But if what it's seeming like right now, Russ does not want to be there, Russ does not want to buy into what Coach Ham wants, and they've just been talking up a good talk or whatever, then no, you send him home because you're wasting out a LeBron year, in my opinion.
I had someone on Twitter message me, Philip Heisch, messaged me and threw out something that was interesting. He said, what if we just waive Westbrook? And so I'm thinking in more of mine, they're not going to waive him, right? Even if he says, I'm not doing it, I'm not doing any of that stuff, they would send him home and then use him as an expiring contract all the way up until the trade deadline in a trade, right? I don't think his value would even change all that much, honestly, if they sent him home.
No. Because
most teams see him, if anything, as just an expiring contract and nothing else. In fact, most teams are going to ask the Lakers to pay in exchange for taking on Russell Westbrook. So I don't think you're risking a lot in terms of value. But Philip threw this out, said, Dennis Schroeder is still sitting out there. I know, right? Getting gross already here. But if you were to send Westbrook home and you offered Schroeder the veteran minimum, he's still sitting out there. Nobody's got money to spend. You give him the veteran minimum. Maybe you find a trade like THT and none for Buddy Hield or something. Or maybe you just tell Schroeder, hey, it's a competition between you and Kendrick Nunn to see who gets the point guard job, and you've got to be willing to take the backup. Is that Lakers team one with Schroeder in place of Westbrook, whether it's off the bench or not? Maybe Austin Reeves jumps in and gets a starting ball handler role. He's talked about that, right? But regardless, replace Russell Westbrook with Dennis Schroeder. Tell Russell Westbrook to go home. Are the Lakers a better team this season with Schroeder or a better team with Russ?
So let me just preference this.
We're living in dark times, my friend. We're living in dark times. I know.
I'm going to preference this by saying it is so very clearly that Russ is the better basketball player than Dennis Schroeder. Again, it is so very clearly that Russ is the better basketball player than Dennis Schroeder. But if one is more locked in than the other and one is more bought in and more willing to help the team than the other, then you go route, especially because Russ is on an expiring contract. It's not like Russ has 2 or 3 years left on his deal, and then it's almost a catastrophe to try to trade him. Bring in Dennis Schroeder or whatever, or heck, Austin Reeves be the main ball handler, or be the point guard, even though LeBron be the primary ball handler.
Not anybody, right?
Yeah, anybody. But if you're telling me Russ is not willing to buy in, okay, then Dennis Schroeder, Scottie Pippen Jr., even though I'm the biggest Scottie Pippen Jr. hater in the world, but hey, give him a shot as the best guard and have Kendrick Nunn start. So if Russ is willing to buy in, then yeah, you go with one of these secondary options, whether it's Nunn, Schroeder, potentially Austin Reeves, Scottie Pippen Jr. Yeah. Again, Russ is definitely the better basketball player than those guys, though.
Absolutely. But again, and hopefully we're talking about worst case scenario here. We're talking about, number one, the Lakers aren't able to trade Russell Westbrook.
Yes.
They don't find anything for him. I'm talking a Kyrie trade, which is still number one at the top of the Lakers to-do list right now, is to trade him for Kyrie Irving if they can. Right now, that has not come to fruition at this point. The other options would be maybe there's a trade with the Jazz. If they trade Donovan Mitchell to the Knicks, there might be something there with Utah to pick up some guys like, I'm not saying anybody specifically, but some of the guys who could, in theory, be involved could be like a Mike Conley, a Jordan Clarkson, Bojan Bogdanovic, Patrick Beverly. Those are some of the kind of more veteran guys that they'd be looking to move on from that maybe have some extra years on their contracts. So that could be out there. Something with the Spurs could maybe be out there. The Spurs as a third team could potentially be out there. And again, we've continued to hear that the Nets, most likely, if there's going to be a trade, they're going to want a third team involved. The Spurs could jump into a Kyrie Irving deal as well. Maybe something with the Pacers, right? You exhaust that option. You exhaust the trade option first, and then you've got to find out, will Russ really do the stuff we're asking him to do? And if it's a no there, that's where you get to the point where, we're talking now about staying home.
Yeah. Really quickly, before we wrap things up, how would you rank your preferences? Like, I'm assuming we agree Kyrie, if possible, is at the tippy top of the list.
Correct.
How would you rank like the rest of your options?
The rest of the theoretical options, whether it be, see, the problem is like you can do a Buddy Hield trade, you can do an Eric Gordon trade without parting with Russ. And I think that's probably what the Pacers and the Rockets would want, is they would not want Russ. They would want other things. They would want THT. They would want Nunn. They would want stuff like that coming back. But I do like, in theory, the Utah trade, depending on what pieces you add. Like if it's Patrick Beverly and Bojan Bogdanovic, if you can find a way to swing those two guys in a Russell Westbrook trade, that's a pretty solid deal in terms of guys who fit with what the Lakers are looking to bring in. So that would be interesting for me if I'm the Lakers. And again, there's so many variables in here, but that would probably be my next top option if that's out there. And that's, again, assuming a Miles Turner and Buddy Hield deal is completely dead and there's no way you're pulling that off. So it's hard to know exactly what's out there and what's not, but that Utah route is interesting to me, though I am wary of trying to execute a trade with Celtic Danny Ainge, even though he's with the Jazz now.
Yeah. Is with agent Thad Voucher of Wasserman after 14 years, that per Adrian Wojnarowski. Voucher cited irreconcilable differences between the two, in addition to not having full alignment on Russ remaining with the Lakers through his contract. Jovan Buha said in The Athletic, the dynamic between the Lakers and Westbrook is becoming untenable with each passing week as they seemingly head for an inevitable divorce. Okay, I will only tell you, I don't have multiple sources on this. Just one person within the Lakers told me that this past year with Westbrook was awful and was a, quote, disaster. And it's really interesting that, you know, the Lakers spent so much, I don't want to say equity, but at least jibber jabber and time over this offseason trying to talk up and talk themselves into Russell Westbrook. I mean, they reportedly asked their new head coaching candidates how they would use Westbrook, what they would think of Westbrook, only now to potentially trade Westbrook. Of course, it would be completely fair to say, well, that was before we thought we'd get our hands on Kyrie Irving, which seems very, very possible. But that's a lot. I mean, look, I mean, anybody's been through it. Divorce is not good. It's not fun. It brings out the worst in people. Right? People who are formerly in love suddenly now are fighting over the most menial things. But you have to actually look at the totality of Russell Westbrook over the past couple years. This would be, and his agent, Voucher, said this, like, fourth trade in 4 years. Right? His advice was stick it out, stick with the Lakers, buy into whatever their plan is. I think that's just lip service. I think this goose is cooked. I think it's done. And what happens with players is when their own play, their own attitude, their own persona causes them to have to change teams, like anybody else, they lash out. They lash out. I mean, look, the sign of maturity is things go wrong and they go, I need to check myself. But most of us are not to that point of clarity. Most of us need a lot of therapy to get there, maybe a long hike, maybe some yoga, maybe some meditation. Maybe they need this to happen a couple of times. And look, here's the thing about Russell Westbrook. Do not get it twisted. Off the basketball floor, he is a fantastic guy. I don't know anybody who says, hey, off the basketball floor, that stuff is all phony. He gives back to the community. Okay? His community in Los Angeles is a big recipient of his goodwill. By all accounts, he's a good dad and a good dude, and people seem to like him. Okay? But what was created in Oklahoma City was a monster that can't exist elsewhere and be successful. That's it. I mean, look, Russell Westbrook's behavior in Oklahoma City, and I know that Utah has now become a factor potentially because they have all this picks and because it appears like they may be tanking and reforming themselves. Utah has become a potential destination, maybe to buy him out, I'm not really sure, but they have all those picks. And part of what the Lakers want in return is picks more than anything else. But it is interesting, maybe even fascinating, that here's a guy, 4 teams in 4 years. Right? I mean, look, we know people that shouldn't be married, and they're married 2 or 3 different times, and the 4th time, the 5th time, whatever, you're like, maybe you shouldn't be married. And I would say that one of the things that Russell Westbrook struggles with is when we told you those were inflated stats, when we told you that the triple-doubles didn't mean nearly as much as triple-doubles maybe should actually mean, the pushback from people in Oklahoma City was, oh, you're just a hater. You're a hater. Right? Because there was this sympathy because Kevin Durant had left. There's this sympathy for Oklahoma City because of their lot in life. That they were so close, and yet KD leaves, and here, Russell Westbrook puts up these numbers. If we go based upon stats, raw, unfiltered, old school stats, Russell Westbrook had 3 consecutive years of the greatest years in the history of the NBA. Remember, no one had averaged a triple-double since Oscar Robertson. Ask yourself how old Oscar Robertson is. Ask yourself if any of you saw Oscar Robertson play. I didn't. I know late in his career, one of those Celtics championship teams, he was on it. I didn't. I know my dad told me how great he is. I did. That's how long ago it had been since somebody averaged triple-double. Even the great Magic Johnson did not average a triple-double. So if you go by stats, he was arguably the greatest player, had the greatest seasons ever. And if you said, hey, really, I don't need point guards to be rebounding. Oh, hey, yes, he leads the league, or he has all these assists, but he doesn't really create shots for others. It's more about ball dominance. Oh, hey, he scores points, okay, but he shoots a poor percentage, not just from 3, but at the rim, and his shooting percentage is getting worse. You say these things to people, and they're like, dude, triple-double. 4 teams, 4 years, and each of them have. I mean.